Hello everyone, I am Diletta Mauri, a social worker and PhD student at the Department of Psychology and Cognitive Science at the University of Trento. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank both the members of the Curly vs. Parents thematic interactive group, which is promoted by the International Research Network on Transitions to Adulthood from Care, and especially those who will speak in this conference series. And I would like also to thank Louise Roberts for coordinating this work together with ExChange Wales. In this presentation, I will share some results of the research I'm conducting in Italy with care experienced parents, mainly concerning their perception of what is meant by breaking the intergenerational cycles of maltreatment, namely through what they call the zero family. I will now turn off my video to focus more on the presentation. First, here is the content overview. I will start with the presentation of the theoretical background and related to this of my research questions. Then I will present some aspects of the methods and move then on the research results and lastly on some final consideration. First of all, since I will talk about child maltreatment, it is needed to say that my study does not focus on a specific type of maltreatment, but I consider those present in the World Health Organization definition, namely all types of physical and/or emotional ill treatment, sexual abuse, neglect, negligence, and commercial or other exploitation. This heterogeneity is also found in the subjective perception of maltreatment experienced by participants, as I will show after. We in many cases, and in line with the literature, recount having experienced multiple and often coexisting forms of maltreatment. The literature review shows that care experienced parents often become early parents, in many cases shortly after leaving the child protection system, that they are exposed to long-term impact of traumatic experiences, also in relation to the child protection system, that certainly can be supportive, but can also mean experiencing potentially traumatic situations. Many parents have low educational levels and precarious economic situations, and many scholars point out the risk of being exposed to second-generation effects of the unresolved loss of attachment figures, and more broadly to many risk factors. Some have also studied and discussed the presence of intergenerational cycles of maltreatment. The concept of intergenerational transmission of child maltreatment has long been studied, and there is currently a growing interest in this subject, which, however, leads many scholars to consider it a controversial subject, since from an empirical point of view, some scholars question intergenerational transmission of child maltreatment, preferring a cautious approach. In fact, concern has been raised about the adequacy of relevant data and research, and in general, it is complex to study this phenomenon, not least because of the many sociocultural variables that are involved. Across studies, findings suggest that most of those who were maltreated as children break the intergenerational transmission. Discontinuity is greater than continuity. However, there is likely to be a significant association between child maltreatment and intergenerational transmission. For instance, most parents who maltreat their children have themselves been victims of maltreatment. Returning to my research, the analysis of the literature on this highly debated topic revealed the presence of cycles of maltreatment, has tried to make sense of them, has identified some aspects that mediate intergenerational transmission, and many studies involve mothers at a young age. Let's explore how the stories that broke the cycle, the daily experiences and the ways of doing family of these parents, especially of fathers and parents with school-age children. In my research, I involve care experienced parents who have broken the cycle of maltreatment. and I intend to explore their personal perceptions of the parenting experience. Specifically, in my research questions are: how do care experienced parents who have broken the intergenerational transmission of child maltreatment experience and represent their role in their daily lives? What factors do they perceive as supportive of interrupting the transmission of maltreatment? Since my interest is to construct a theory on parenting that is strongly grounded in the meaning of parents, I choose the constructivist grounded theory method as it seems the closest to this cause for the centrality of subject's perspective in the construction of knowledge and for in-depth access to subject's representations. Here, you can see my project timeline, which includes from the beginning the construction of an advisory board of care-experienced parents with whom I discuss my work. I therefore conducted a preliminary study in which I involved 11 stakeholders in order to entering the field and starting to know my research object. After constructing my research tools, I conducted a pilot study with 5 care-experienced parents, and then continued the data collection by involving further 19. The last part of my work, which I conducted simultaneous to data collection as required by grounded theory, was the coding of all interviews. This, which I will present briefly in the next slides, was also discussed with the advisory board. In fact, I sent my analysis to 6 parents who are part of my committee, and then discussed it in detail in individual interviews with each of them. My sampling strategy is theoretical because of its relevancy for grounded theory approach, as it allows the development of a conceptual framework from data. This was initially based on purposive sampling, with the inclusion criteria of having had experience in alternative care, whether in residential or foster care, being parents not involved in child protection system and perceived as well-adjusted. Lastly, having children under 18 years of age. Choosing to focus on parents who have not contact with the child protection system at the time of the interview, who state their own satisfaction with the parenting experience, and who have been reported as good parents, prompts me to state that they do not reproduce the experience of maltreatment they experienced in their own childhood. In addition, the sample was constructed by seeking maximum differentiation regarding same criteria which have emerged as significant in the study of intergenerational transmission of maltreatment, namely parents' gender, children's age, socioeconomic status, and education, characteristics of care experience. Currently, my sample consists of 24 parents, mostly mothers, but with a good representation of fathers and very different ages. More than half of the parents have children older than 6 years. Regarding the characteristics of care, these are very heterogeneous, with more than half having very long experiences and characterized by medium to high instability. Most parents have experience in residential than in foster care, and in terms of perceived maltreatment, in most cases, it is neglect and emotional violence. Also, for many, there is an overlap between the various types of maltreatment. My data consists of 24 interviews concerning the everyday life and practices of the parenting experience. These have been collected online and had an average duration of about 2 hours. Here, I introduce my grounded theory analysis, which put at the center the concept of what the interviews refer to as the zero family, namely a starting without a background. This core category is linked to the 3 main categories and each to 3 subcategories, as in this figure. These are depicted as recursive in the parenting experience. There is in fact a circularity in the occurrence and handling of each. Albeit with different shades, many of the interviews portray the experience of becoming parents as a new beginning, coupled with the hope that their children will have a happier childhood than theirs. This is characterized by a strong discontinuity with their own experience as children, a sort of a milestone from the past, where the family tree is symbolically restarted, as told by a father. She and I are Adam and Eve. We are the first ones. My family tree starts when my son was born. But this process is also characterized by many critical issues or challenges, such as the loneliness of not relying on a network of people, as in this mother talks. We are kind of a zero family from which we start again. So, the apprehension that I undoubtedly have toward my children, even too much sometimes, in my opinion, is compensating for the absence of other figures. You know the saying, it takes a village to raise a child? In our case, there are not many others for the children. Being the zero family also means for the parents as the end point of a journey that has engaged them, and this is what enables them to start something different. This process starts with distancing oneself, reframing the past, finding ways to deal with negative roots, but also with the struggle of rebuilding everything from scratch. The first area emerging as significant in the construction of parenting concerns coming to terms with one's past as a child. For many, this means first and foremost learning to protect themselves, as one mother stated. I had an inner mission. For me, for many years, it was just to save myself, to put myself in a safe situation, even at the cost of neglecting my birth parents. And I think this is important. When there is an initial fracture, when you are born into a family that then breaks up, you have to face a period alone and then you don't go back to your birth family. The initial crack is there, and probably you will have to live with that sadness forever. And this is also linked to a sort of rebellion against a destiny, which seems already written. Parents recount highly stigmatizing experience that had very strong repercussions on their self-perception, even when projecting into the role of parents, as well as how there are possible rebellions that allow them to build different futures, as one dad states. I wanted to prove that I was able to cope on my own, that everything I was told, that in the future I would be like my father, that I would be a drunkard, the label I was given as a child because I came from a disadvantaged family. For me, it was the strength to react to that. Finally, it is cross-cutting to the interviews, the importance assigned to the ability of being able to value all positive relations experienced. Interviews told especially how they learned to see their children through their people they were seen by in turn, often adults meet in care. This category concerns the description of the process of constructing their parenthood, trying to interweave their own self-representation as parents with their personal experience regarding the assumption of this role. The interviews reveal a process of parenting construction in strong opposition to that experienced in their experience as children, and the pressure of this search to do it in different ways, as one father stated. When you became a parent, you are reminded of what you want to prove to your children, that you are the opposite of what your parents were. But at the same time, you have demons inside that are confusing, because all the negativity that we have experienced, that is ours, is visible, and we are also afraid that the children will see this. Keeping up with the construction of a parenting in strong discontinuity with that experienced in one's childhood is even more complex when confronted with situations that reactivate emotions and responses that lead back to that phase of life. A mother affirmed, "One thing I really had to curb was aggression, which I also experienced as a child. I lived for a while with my father, who was destabilizing, aggressive, violent. So I really got to know these aspects in depth, which I carry with me. And these came back with the child because they bring out your worst self. I really remember a moment when I said, I'm going to kill him now. It was triggering a very important conflict between me and my son. And I remember this period when I really struggled. Finally, the transition to parenthood in this challenging process exposed all parents to the fear of not being adequate for the task they are preparing for, as one mother affirmed. I have no patience. I give him a lot of agitation. I can't reassure him when he cries, when he calls me mommy, mommy. But I'm not one of those sweet, nice mummies. No, I'm too hard on him too. So I'm afraid that emotionally, I'm doing a lot of damage to my son. The last category refers more to the description of what it means for interviews to do family and to be parents through the management of day-to-day educational and reading practices. All parents describe themselves as highly engaged in the relationship with their children. The search for a strong connection with them is firstly described as the opportunity to establish the relationship they feel they have lacked as children, as stated by a mother. I am present with my children. I will have a dialogue with them. I am sure I will get that because I am already putting all my strength into it now. I want to be that mom you can't do without. The parents interviewed describe themselves as being concerned about their children's happiness, both in the sense of seeking it through their daily experiences and relationships, as stated by a mother. In the end, I always choose the solution that makes them smile the most, that I never know if it is the right one that makes them learn something over time. But this concern is also source of the burden and great responsibility of realizing it, which can cause great tension. As I have tried to tell you briefly through this short presentation, the strong engagement in their parental role, also due to high expectation of discontinuity from their own experience as children, exposes parents to great challenges. These seem to push respondents toward an acceptance of idealized standards of adequate and, in many cases, of intensive parenting. The confrontation with doing well seems to be very strong in their representations, leading them, for example, with great effort to question such standards, as in the account of this father who is careful to offer quality time to his son, with a great deal of compromise for himself. What is challenging is the construction of balances that is always having to negotiate, to listen, to understand what they want to do, to be able to do it. But sometimes I am not able to manage and I am taking the crap of psychotropic drugs. I must say that from this point of view, however, my son has lost nothing. He does not have an absent father who watches television on Sundays. To conclude my presentation, I would like to share a few simple thoughts with you, knowing that many other reflections would be possible and that it would be interesting to discuss them together. Firstly, it is important to point out that, like many other parents would not share the same childhood experiences, they highlight the complexity of raising children. This is common to the more broad experience of parenting, highlighting how dealing with the ordinary challenges, the potential otherness that is created when the success or failure of parenting is narrowly defined, as Beckett and colleagues argued. However, they highlight, the parents I interviewed, how they can rely on fewer resources, for instance, socioeconomic inequalities, but not only, and on greater pressure to act in discontinuity with their parents, rebuilding everything from scratch. Nevertheless, parents show significant personal resources, partly also acquired through child protection system, such as the ability to protect themselves. In this regard, Also, the discussion with my advisory board underlined the importance of more support, which should be understood as which should not be understood as a substitute, rather, on the contrary, which would sustain agency and coping skills. I suggest you to read, in this direction, the Italian Parents blog, which highlight some concrete proposals. Thanks for your attention.